Hi everyone, thanks for listening to Two Bi Guys and this series on bisexual married men, released weekly throughout November and December, except FYI, I will be off next Monday so I can take a break over the Thanksgiving weekend from editing, but new episodes will resume in December. I have a bunch more already recorded, can't wait to release them. Between now and then, my book will be released. Bisexual Married Men, Stories of Relationships, Acceptance, and Authenticity is officially available on November 30th, which is next Thursday, depending on when you're listening to this. I'm hosting a book launch party on Zoom on that day, Thursday, November 30th, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm also hosting an in-person event in New York City at the LGBT Center on Saturday, December 2nd, and an in-person event in Los Angeles at Book Soup on January 22nd. To get more info on those events and the link to the Zoom launch party, head to my website, robertbrookscohen.com, or check the Two Bi Guys social media bios. And you can also find links to purchase my book on my website. I am so excited to share it with you all very soon. And stay tuned in just a moment for an awesome interview with one of two couples in the book. It's mostly just bi men, but there are two couples featured in the book. And today you will hear from Keith and Candice Parnell. But first, a word from our sponsor. This episode of Two Bi Guys is sponsored by NoCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That is relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. This is not necessarily an issue that is unique to the bi community, but it is definitely an issue that affects some people in the bi community. If that's you, breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to nocd.com to get evidence-based treatment. NoCD offers effective, affordable, and convenient OCD therapy. NoCD therapists are trained in exposure response prevention, or ERP therapy, the gold standard treatment for OCD. With NoCD, you can do virtual, live, face-to-face video sessions with one of their licensed, specially trained therapists, and they accept most major insurance plans. Getting started is simple. You get matched with a licensed OCD therapist right through your phone, do live face-to-face video sessions with therapists specialized in treating OCD, and in between sessions, you can get support with their in-app tools and free peer communities. To find out more about NoCD, visit nocd.com to book a free 15-minute call. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Two Bi Guys. Welcome back to this series on bisexual married men. I'm interviewing people who I already interviewed for my book, which is coming out November 30th. And so I'm so excited to welcome back and to see my friends Keith and Candice Parnell. Welcome to Two Bi Guys.
Yeah, thank you. We're so happy to be back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're super stoked to hear back from you. So.
It's lovely to see you again, and I love that we get both of you. You know, most of the book I interviewed just the men, but there's two interviews at the end that are couples, and they're a different shape than some of the others, and I just thought they're really interesting and a whole new layer of like hearing your perspective, Candice, and hearing you guys tell your story together and how that works. And so I am excited to chat again. If you have read the book or will be reading the book, Keith and Candice's pseudonyms in the book are, what is it? Evan and Lindsay.
Yes.
Right? How do you feel about those pseudonyms? Do you identify with them?
We were talking about that last night. I don't mind Evan. I was like, that's a nice change from Keith. But
I'm not sure about Lindsay, but I can get with it.
All right. Okay, good. I'm glad. Well, now you're back to Keith and Candice, so you can be your true Candice self today.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone should read your story in the book. There's going to be a lot more details in there than we will get to today. But let's go over it and let's talk about what's happened since then, since it's been a few years since that interview. So, but before we go to your story, I want to ask each of you, whoever wants to go first, why did you decide to participate in this project in the first place?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with hearing other stories on the podcast that were so similar to my own story. Even in the case that I'm married in a straight presenting relationship, and I didn't hear that as much, so I thought that this was a good way to be that example.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me too. I mean, I loved your podcast, obviously, and the opportunity to get our word, our side or our story out there, because I know that it's not one that's told often enough. And it was something I wished so badly for all those years ago, just to hear an example and see a story like ours. So I was very happy to do it.
Yep. Awesome. I love it. And we'll get to some of the even more activist work you guys are doing in this space a little later. So let's talk about the bi journey and the journey of your relationship, which I know since you've been together since you were pretty young, they're very intertwined. So I don't even know who to ask. I maybe Keith, you can begin, but then
Yeah.
you guys can tell this story. Like, tell me about your bi journey and your awareness of that, and how, as the timeline at the same time as your relationship, like how did all that intersect and go?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a small town. I wasn't, we weren't super religious, but I went to Baptist church. We were just, it wasn't the queerest place to grow up. So I didn't really have any kind of identity or understanding about sexuality outside of binary. Like it just didn't exist in my plane. So I was the odd one out, and but didn't know there was even
Wasn't even
an
on the
option.
radar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as far as bisexual being a term, I just didn't know what it was. So yeah, it wasn't. We were together. We got together in high school, and I think we were together maybe 2 or 3 years.
About 2 years. Yeah.
Before I eventually came out as bisexual.
I
Yeah,
yanked you
yeah.
out on accident.
Removed as bisexual. But
So you actually realized it relatively young. I mean, you 2 years
in
after you met,
retrospect,
but
Yeah.
yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah,
Yeah, you were about 20,
yeah. That
20-ish.
sounds
But
right.
he knew, but he didn't know what it was, So he knew he was different and had these feelings, but didn't know there was a, you know, thing
Right.
for it.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned you felt like the odd one out. Like, can you tell me what it was like in that period before you had fully understood bisexuality, but you knew something was different? What was that like?
Yeah. Well, I think I always remembered having crushes on boys and girls. I think,
I think we were just talking about
gosh,
this. You were like
like,
12, you said, when you
yeah.
first remember something. It
And
was a movie.
oh gosh, I don't even know. But yeah, it's basically the same by stereotype you see in a lot of movie memes where it was like you can't pick which one in the movie
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
that.
Yeah. The Mummy,
um,
maybe, or something like that.
yes, the Mummy is a good one. But yeah, you start noticing stuff like that. I think one of the ones that comes up in some of your other interviews was the underwear aisle. That's always something that, yeah, I don't know. It's like your first public.
Because you don't see it
Yeah,
in normal life.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't know. But for me, it wasn't anything that you ever talked about or acknowledged or even hinted at, for a lot of
Or felt safe enough to even
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because I don't know, you're, I never actually had a super negative reaction after coming out, but I don't know if that would have
Been the case.
been the case.
Mm-hmm.
If
If you had come out
yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
you mean?
Mm-hmm.
What was the environment like that you were in?
Growing up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, um, definitely small town redneck, like country, like, he was always definitely I grew up in Orlando, which was different. And I moved to our small town. And so I didn't have the same experience as he did, but he definitely had the very much like small town country.
Yeah.
So just never felt that safety of like even being able to question.
And it wasn't so much that there was a super anti
Mhm.
LGBTQ
Just
type
not a
of, there
presence.
just wasn't a
Mhm.
presence.
Yeah.
I think the first queer person I met was like a cousin of mine's girlfriend. And that was curious for me because she was very masculine. So it was kind of like a first introduction to like an androgyny, um,
Mhm.
first person
Mhm.
experience
Yeah.
of.
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
So then it was about 2 years into your relationship that you came out. So what led up to that? And then what happened after that?
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know what we were doing, but we were looking for something on the computer. And I think she was looking for
I was looking for something and
like
found
pictures
like
or something.
downloads,
Uh,
porn downloads.
yeah.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah. And it was, I certainly didn't mean to download them. But I think it was when I was thinking back and actually reading back, just looking over our
Chapter.
chapter,
Mhm.
I like giggled at remembering that it was basically like your play button and your download button on some players would be like right beside each other. So it's very easy to download.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she
I found
found
them
them
and I was
and
like,
basically
"What is
was,
this?"
yeah,
It was a denial at first,
yeah.
like a complete like, "I don't know what that is," And I was not letting it go, and, it was just a, like, it w just in that night, it evolved from, "No, it's not mine," to, "It's mine, I was just curious," to, "I think I'm bi," and all within, like, a span of hours of, like, a lot of talking and a lot of, like, yanking it out of
Hmm.
him, and then after in retrospect, I felt bad that I kinda pulled him out of the closet with me anyway. But it was definitely interesting situation.
What was going on in your mind that night, Keith?
Um, I think it was just the almost a sense of relief, honestly. I mean, there was definitely the shock factor, a level of embarrassment for being, even caught. Which, I mean, I think it's assumed that a good chunk of people watch porn, but just being caught, it was almost like a hand in the cookie jar moment. Um, but I think immediately afterwards, once we were able to talk a little bit more, then it starts coming into your mind. Now this is out. This is a new avenue for our relationship that we don't necessarily know how to navigate because we've never had any. It's not there. Like you just don't see it as
Mhm.
often, especially in a straight presenting relationship, unless there's a real reason to come out as bi. It's
And
it's
neither
very
of us
easily,
really had I mean, I don't know, it's like looking back, I'm pretty sure we had a few friends in high school that identified as bi, loosely,
yeah,
but, like, I don't even remember knowing what it really
yeah.
meant.
It,
Like,
it
I was like,
never
"Okay,
really,
whatever," until it became something that I had to, like, understand and really you know, get to know, and that was hard. I mean, we were so young, and it was a different world with the
Yeah.
internet, and there was a lot
Yeah.
less to find, and so it was weird, and then also, he didn't have a lot of answers for me because he
mm,
didn't really still
yeah,
understand most of it himself still at
Mm.
that point.
Hmm.
Um, I had so many questions, but he couldn't give me answers. And that was a problem for so many years because
Yeah.
I felt like he was lying to me,
Mm.
or he was just trying to not hurt my feelings, or, all I could think of was he just won't open up to me, but he really just didn't know what to say.
There wasn't anything there
Yeah.
except for the same question marks.
Right.
So it took a lot of navigating to start filling in the blanks.
Yeah. What was going through your mind, Candice, initially? And then how did that evolve for you as you learned more?
Um, it's very interesting because initially I was like really shocked and just didn't even know. I didn't really even know what to think. And I actually, I think it was after he told me he was bi, I left the house, like went barefoot and was just walking around the neighborhood. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and just went and left. And he ended up coming after me, and it was just, I just didn't know, I didn't even know what to say or what to react. I didn't know what it meant, because also he was also very, always very, like, took good care of himself and was cared about his appearance, which was very uncommon where we were from. So people always joked that he was gay anyway. And for a long time, his parents would be like, "We always assumed Keith was gay." And I was like, "Oh, hilarious." And then that is all I could think about. I was like, "Holy hell, he is. Maybe he is now. That's what it is. That's the big thing. And he's gay, and that's all it is." And so, I came back, we talked for a long time, and that was the first time I saw him cry. And I think it was just like an insane relief. It seemed like, and I was like, "I love you no matter what, this isn't anything that we can't get through." Excuse me. Um, but of course, after that, I had more time to overthink about it. And it just got really bad after that because I just, you know, sat with my thoughts too much. I tried to talk to him about it, but he didn't know what to tell me or how to help me because neither of us knew. Um, I tried to talk to friends. I think I mentioned that in our chapter too. And it was just nobody knew how to deal with it or what to say.
Yeah.
All I got was, "Oh, I couldn't deal with that." Or
Yeah.
I would always think he was cheating, or he's probably just even my friends would think that way because they just didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So at first I was like, I love you, it's fine. And then it just got bad
Yeah.
after that.
Well, you said you had these thoughts like, what if he really is gay and that's the thing, and what if he's
Mhm.
gonna leave me and stuff?
Mhm.
How did those thoughts make you feel, Candace? And then we'll come to you, Keith.
Um, it was really hard because I think if he had had a different upbringing, it wouldn't have been so deep in my mind. I was like, he's gay. He won't ever tell his family. This is it. This is what it is. Like, I was so convinced because, I was like, of course he wouldn't come out. Of course he wouldn't tell everyone. I'm his beard, and that's all I could think of. And I was like, this is terrible, but I was like, people think I'm an idiot. Like, I'm the only one that couldn't see this, obviously. And then I was just thinking about people joking and his parents always joking. I was like, oh my God, I'm the only one that didn't know. And I just felt like, humiliated, which is very selfish, but also just like, how can I ever? It's the pull string of the mixed orientation relationship saga. How can I ever be enough? Even if he's not gay, how can I ever be enough? And, I know now that that's, it's a complicated question for many in the mixed orientation relationship, but that was just all I kept resting on was how can I ever be enough? And I didn't know, you know?
Hmm.
So,
I want to come back to that thought toward the end, but
yeah.
because it's really interesting. But so, and
Yeah.
Keith, when you guys were in this period where you weren't quite on the same page and figuring it out, what thoughts were you having and what were you feeling?
Stay close to me
Uh-huh.
so that he's not trying to cut us out.
Yes, stay in the center of the frame.
I'm just trying to get away from this story.
There's no escaping.
Yeah, so it was really just trying to find a balance between that sort of newly opened wound of being, exposed. But then, trying to also answer, the questions that she had, which were all like reasonable questions. I just didn't know. I had only recently come into a term to apply to my sexuality. So I think I was scared for what that would mean for our marriage, not having a blueprint of how it works.
Normalcy.
And it's just things that you don't think of until you're like there in that moment, and then you don't know what to do. So I guess that was the biggest thing, is I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how it would change what we had already started building together. And I didn't see that it had to change. So I think I would have happily just at that moment just backed back into my closet and been fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's honestly where I needed to be at the moment, just to figure things out for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that confusion and that fear about what's going to happen is so common for people, especially if they don't have examples or don't know anyone else in a similar situation. It's like, what does this look like? So, so how did you guys move through this and figure it out and as a couple?
Knowing everything I know now, I always say that I wish, like, I have so many regrets. And he's always like, that's so stupid, because it made us who we are. But it's like, I wish I hadn't reacted the way I did in some ways, because I felt like I put more pressure and shame on him, out of my own fear and insecurities. I say I wish we would have gone to therapy, but we couldn't afford it. We were broke children. We were teenagers, living alone, living on our own, going to school and working, we were young. And so it's like, I don't know what we could have done differently. And also, even still, it's a problem finding therapists that understand this, I can't imagine back then.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's not much we could have done differently, but, there was a lot of years of up and down. I think he, like he said, I think he did retreat back into the closet and tried to just like not say anything and not, I say he wouldn't give me answers. And I think sometimes it was, he just tried to avoid, because he thought that was better. He thought that wouldn't send me down into a black hole, of depression, because he said the wrong thing. And so, it was a struggle between trying to get him to open up, get him to look internally and learn more about himself, so that he could answer those things. And, it caused a lot of issues with us sexually, because it was like, it caused a performance anxiety for him, because it became, for me, it was like sex was a proof that he was into me,
Right.
and it was like, it made it no fun for him,
Right.
and so it caused a lot of issues with that. And looking back, that sucks. I wish I could change that, but we got through it. We actually saw a sex therapist this year. That was fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, how did actually? I think that's. I'm going to pause you because I think that's like so incredibly common, that part, and you're not the only story in the book that's come up.
Yeah.
Is there any insight you can give us with whatever you're comfortable sharing? Like, how did you get through that? What did the therapy help with?
We were talking about that last night too. It's so funny because I've been in this space for so long. I feel like I am very, well versed in all the things there is to know with sex education. It's kind of just my thing. So she really didn't tell us anything we didn't know. We're great communicators. Communication is a skill. It's something you have to learn and practice. We're not born with it. Our society sucks at it as a whole. That is literally the most cliche thing, but it's the biggest thing. Learn how to communicate and communicate your needs and wants and don't wants. And really just realizing that you have to make time, even outside of anything to do with mixed orientation relationships. You have to make time for your relationship together. We don't have children yet, but it's like that is so easy to happen for everybody. You let children get in the way, you let work get in the way, you let stress get in the way. And it really just is it's the little things that matter. And but on top of that, just giving each other space to have your thoughts and desires and feelings, and that it's okay. And I see that a lot in the mixed orientation realm of not being enough and worrying what your partner's thinking, and are they thinking about a guy during sex? Are they, it's never ending, and it can just eat you alive if you let it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I've been there, but it's like I just want to tell people to not overthink it sometimes, but it's really hard.
And Keith,
Yeah.
would you agree that the communication and the openness was what helped push through that?
100%. And it was in the beginning, she had a ton of questions. I had a ton of questions, and neither one of us had the answers. So there wasn't, I attribute the most of the struggles in the early portion of our relationship to that, as we just didn't know enough about anything to have conversations.
LGBTQ, sexual relationships, anything. So
I mean, the only way you're going to know things is to, educate yourself on it, and then have conversations with other people and start building, a group and a safe space to have those conversations. I think that was it. And it's something that I always come back to with a lot of mixed orientation relationships, and a lot of the blame for the failure of their relationship is on a square peg, round hole mixed orientation relationship. And what ends up happening in a ton of the ones that we're looking into is this could have been a gay, straight relationship, and it would still fail. Because you're not doing the basics. And the basics is open line of communication.
Yeah. Right. The underlying issues have nothing to do with sexuality the most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. Is what we've found.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's like the toll that censoring yourself takes. Even sometimes you don't realize you're doing it, but if you're not asking for what you want and what you need, or it takes this toll that disconnects people.
Yeah. And it starts building resentment and confusion.
Right.
And then particularly when, both of us have habits of overthinking things. So, and once you take a little seed like that and it starts, going off in your echo chamber, it gets carried away very easily.
Totally. In all this communication, as you worked through this, did non-monogamy come up at all? And what were those discussions like?
Yeah. That was something, and we talk about that in the book a little bit, is I struggled with that a lot because he had never had any opportunities to be with anybody else. And so I struggled a lot with, well, how do you know? How do you know you're bi? But also, how do you know you won't need it in the future, or, won't be curious in the future, or whatever. So that was, something that I struggled with. And I am an inherently monogamous person. And I knew that about myself. But from the very beginning, I always said that if anything ever, if he ever felt like he needed that, it became a need, that, we could maybe try like a threesome situation. But that was the only thing I was comfortable with in a committed relationship. If it was a need, it'd have to be something we both did and both enjoyed, and someone we both enjoyed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was sort of more I'm sorry, can you hear the cat?
No, I can, but that's okay. There's a long history of dogs and cats interrupting two bi guys interviews.
I so I don't think I ever felt it as a need. And I think that was something that I said very early on, but it's hard to hear that on the other side and believe it when every other story that is along the same the route as ours, it's the man is wanting to
Every story in the open, I will say.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's an important differentiation, because that's something I always tell people is the happy, normal, successful, boring relationships, mixed orientation relationships, aren't in forums looking for support. They're not
Right.
in Reddit complaining. They're not. So it's like all you see is my husband cheated on me, or wife. My partner cheated on me, or my partner came out to me and in the same breath asked to have sex with somebody else, which is okay, but
Yeah.
that when that's all you see, and then you're in the throes of this new fearful situation, and you get online and that's all you see, you're like, well, we'll just end it now because I can't handle this. Or they just feel pressured to give in to non-monogamy when they don't truly want that. And non-monogamy is so hard in any circumstance, let alone one that's not starting on a good foundation.
Right.
So it's really hard because there's nothing wrong with it. It's just in this realm, it's like that's all they see, and it really makes it feel
There's
worse.
not enough success stories for it to be, if you have a successful poly relationship, I applaud that. But again, with any other relationship, the amount of communication that is needed to sustain that long term.
And if you're not already not communicating, it's like not going to work.
Right. The communication is key, and it definitely won't work if both people don't want it. And if one person isn't communicating that, then it breeds the resentment we talked about. And it is interesting that people associate this so closely together, but the statistics show that bi couples are only very slightly more likely to be non-monogamous. It's still the majority of bi people are still monogamous. And in the book, there were a few cases of infidelity, a few cases of open relationships that are consensual and working, and then a few that tried opening up briefly and went back to monogamy, and then another few that have remained monogamous the whole time. And the majority of stories in the book have landed on monogamy. And so, it's just this misconception that's out there that they're identical, and that's the only path forward.
It is. Yeah. And it's hard because, as the straight partner, they get online, and that's all they find. They go to Reddit, which is a cesspool anyway, and all they find is like the worst of humanity, and people like, not just bi people, but people bragging about cheating and and it's like, it's so hard to get people to just like steer away from that and not get into a rabbit hole. And then that's all they do is associate that with their partner's sexuality. And you can't separate it. No matter how much you try, you can't get them to separate it. And I understand it because I was there, but it's like, how do we fix it? I don't understand. I don't know.
Right. And certainly for some people that happens, and someone's is cheats, and then that hurts that but yes, we shouldn't generalize it. So Candice, tell me about like what you did with those feelings you're talking about. Like you couldn't find a good space, and so you
Yeah.
created one. Like what led to that, and why'd you do it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this was over 17 years ago. The internet was a very different place. um, you know, because I tried to talk to a few friends that didn't work. That was all I had. I didn't know what else to do. There weren't books. I went to the internet and I found a really awful group that at the time was on Yahoo. They've been around since like the 80s. And, you know, unfortunately, it is just full of those people that are very angry, and rightfully so. A lot of them are older. There was a different generation. The men will never likely ever come out. And they're just living with that shame and guilt, and they are hurt, and they've been hurt, and some of them, their partners are narcissists, and that's another thing that gets thrown around so much in this community, in the mixed orientation community, is like, not every non-straight partner is a not lying, abusing, cheating narcissist just because they were afraid to be who they were. But that gets thrown around a lot in some of these really negative communities. um, and I mean, I got in there and they were like, your husband's already probably cheating. And you're just naive. And if he's not, he will, and he'll want to open up the relationship. They all do. Um, and so that was what I had. That's all I had. And it was like, it almost destroyed us. And I attribute that to a lot of our problems. I couldn't, it was like a cancer. Once I had those ideas in my head, I couldn't get them out. And so I left those groups. But I actually became a resource for that group, for people who wanted to make their relationships work. And so they would send the very few people my way. And I would just communicate with them through email and try to be positive with them, even though I didn't know what I was doing myself and I was struggling. But I was like, look, we have great partners and we can try to make this work. And nobody else was saying that. Um, and then I ended up I joined another group that was okay, but it was Yahoo groups also. And I hated the group format. So eventually I created a Facebook group, but nobody would join. Everyone wanted to they were too afraid. It wasn't anonymous. So they wouldn't join. So it sat for like 2 years with like 10 people in it. Because everyone was so afraid to be found out or, and that's a big struggle still. Reddit is my biggest. I have a Reddit group too that I kind of took over, that someone abandoned. And Reddit is the biggest one because people just want to be anonymous, which makes me sad, but I get also. But it just makes it hard to be personable. And but yeah, created the groups, and we actually created a website that ended up being harder than we thought to find positive resources, sadly. um, so we just share whatever we find, your podcast, stories we can find. I tried to be a blogger, but I got so hung up on being scared to trigger people because I knew everyone's story was so different. And I felt like I was trying to like preach positivity and what it could be, but it was like everything I said would trigger somebody. And I have to get over that. I know I do. But I don't want to make someone's journey harder either.
Right. It's a wonderful impulse, but yeah, there's infinite opinions on
Yeah,
the
I
internet.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So we're trying to reboost that. It links to our support group, so we're thankful for that at least. And people do find it. Um, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to find positive resources, positive studies, positive, or just any studies. I mean, about mixed orientation relationships and bisexuality. It's hard to find.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Keith, when you think about all those negative comments of like he's got the wives saying, "Oh, he's gonna cheat on me," or "He's gonna need to have sex with men," or "He's whatever,
Right.
this and that, confused and gonna." How does that make you feel, and how did you get involved with this support group and everything?
Um,
Mhm.
I I am not as active as I should be in this support group. Just to put that out there. This is she's
is
pushing
Candice.
it through.
Okay. Okay, well, stick with my first question. I shouldn't have asked you two at once.
No, that's okay.
How do you feel about all
Yeah.
those comments? Yeah.
I feel like I view most of those comments from the lens that the environment that they're being put into is a bunch of people who have been wronged and hurt at some point, and the things that they are saying I don't think are illegitimate for their stories, their personal stories. But the part where it does get rough is where it's not, their story isn't my story. Their story isn't necessarily, two usernames down story. Like, it's everyone is going through a different journey, and
but it's almost like where I've made my mission to try to prove it can be different. Their mission is like to prove that.
Understand
it's really, and they talk to me like I'm an idiot, and like I am like pushing false positivity, like toxic positivity, and like, I mean, it's just, you name it. They are just, and I understand their pain, but it's so when they're going in there and telling people, get a lawyer and start divorcing your husband who just came out to you last night, it's like, that's not okay. It's not okay. And it's so hurtful. These are open forums that like people, it's just really sad.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. It's sad. There's nothing I don't like to say, but I do say, you can't save them all. My goal, in being vocal about my sexuality and wanting our story out there, is to connect with other people who are wanting to make their relationship work, just like any other relationship, despite sexuality. And just providing, a bouncing board if needed, just for most folks that reach out to me are just asking just general questions, things
Instagram,
that it's usually his, Instagram,
because he uses hashtags like "bi guy" or whatever, and people find him that way.
It allows someone to come in and they'll start having a conversation, and a lot of times it'll be the same type of place that we were, 17 years ago. So I'm able to kind of give them, some form of hope. It's because we didn't have that.
But it's hard too, because like I struggle sometimes with wanting to push people to come out to their partners, and I just forget that not every partner is me, I guess. And I've struggled with that sometimes, because I'm like, people will message me on Reddit and then they'll delete their account and I'll never see them again. And I'm like, God, like, did I send them into the end of their relationship? Like, it's really hard. And I worry about that, because I just want people to be honest, but I want them to just be able to be themselves.
Right.
And they deserve that. But it's such a hard thing in this setting to navigate that.
Right. I totally agree. And I get the conflict in you in that, but I also think that being your authentic self, especially in a relationship, is possibly more important than that relationship continuing forever. If it's not authentic, then is it the right one?
And that's a conversation that we run into pretty frequently as well, as if it's not going to work, what can you salvage of this relationship? Maybe you're not intimate partners anymore, but where does that go, especially with couples that have children, or that their family is very integrated into their relationship? That's a whole dynamic that you have to communicate with your partner about.
I can't wait for you guys to read the rest of the book, because there are other stories in the book that are exactly like that. There's a little bit more with Keith and Candice coming up, but there is even more on Patreon. There are over 35 minutes of bonus content with Keith and Candice. Yes, 35 minutes. We talked for a while because there were two of them and we had a lot to talk about. Plus, there is a full video of the entire interview exclusively at patreon.com/Robert Brooks Cohen. We talked about the response to Keith's coming out, including an interesting response he got from his grandmother. We talked about the backlash that Candice sometimes receives for celebrating her husband's sexuality. We talked about what's changed in their relationship over the past 3 years since the initial interview. The short version is that everything is better. We chatted about when they attended their first Pride, something that used to terrify Candice. We circled back to the fear of not being enough for a bi partner, and we talked about what they're looking forward to in the future, which turned into a really interesting discussion. So head over to patreon.com/Robert Brooks Cohen for 35 more minutes with Keith and Candice, plus full videos of this entire series on bi married men, bonus content on all future episodes, and early access to everything. Thank you for listening and supporting Two Bi Guys, and now here is more with Keith and Candice. Last question. How does your sexuality, Keith, and being part of a mixed orientation marriage, Candice, how does it bring you joy?
You want to go?
Yeah. I think I do get a tremendous amount of joy in just being happy with my sexuality. I think as simply as that sounds, when it's something that's constantly in your head all the time, and like I could get in dark places just putting myself back into that mindset of before I was out. So as much as there was a struggle and somewhat resistant learning curve, I'm happy in my understanding and in my sexuality, and I'm comfortable talking to and on the subject because that's what I needed. And it's nice to come full circle with it with a lot of the folks that I connect with, to be able to, fill that gap for them.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything else to compare it to. I mean, he's pretty banging in general, and I don't know if that's attributed to his sexuality. He's a great guy. He's not like toxic masculinity. I don't have to worry about nothing of that. We always joke that that's because he's bi. We just attribute it to that. I swear that bi guys are just more well-rounded, and I don't know. It just seems like they're just, right? I swear.
I feel like that checks.
Yeah. I swear. I don't know. I mean, there just is a lack of shame, or not shame, just I don't know. I can't even explain it. I don't know. And I see bi guys talk about this a lot in communities where they having bottoming for someone literally gave them a different appreciation for being a woman. And I feel like even if someone hasn't done that, I just feel like they have a different outlook on relationships and existing in the world sometimes. I mean, obviously there's bad people of any type, but I don't know. I just feel like I don't have anything to compare it to. I know he's amazing. Maybe it's because he's bi.
I think the same way that I once I started viewing sexuality on a spectrum, it's hard not to apply that same spectrum mentality to everything. And you start seeing perceptions in ways that you wouldn't otherwise have seen. And maybe that attributes to the awesomeness of bisexuals.
Yeah.
Is once you came to a point where you can see stuff in a broader light.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we just have so much joy together in general. I feel like it does relate to our mixed orientation status as well. Like, we're very open with each other. There's really, there's nothing I wouldn't do for him. if he came to me and was like, I want to try this. There's literally nothing I wouldn't do, regardless of his sexuality, but I feel like we've gotten to that point because we are just so, it just doesn't matter. None of it matters.
Well, there's an open communication and trust built in to that asterisk that goes over I'll do anything. Because we've built that. That's not something I would encourage everyone to expect from their partner. Without a considerable amount of communication
and
effort.
trust. Yeah, that's for sure. I just definitely, I have so much joy in, having the community that we have, the support groups, and being able to come and talk to him about everything and like bouncing each other off, things off of each other. And I feel like it's helped us being in these groups because we're always talking about the relevant issues or, and it's helped us grow in that also. And I definitely, enjoy and look forward to being a light for somebody, even though our story is different than a lot of people's. I just, all relationships, if you just take sexuality out of it, I think so many people struggle in silence with so many things, sex very much included. And if we could just get past that in general, that would be like monumentous,
Open sexual discussions everywhere.
Yes.
All the
time.
And make it known.
I am all ready to have an awkward sexual conversation at any dinner party. I am here for it.
They're the best. I love everything you said, and it just makes me think about how, like, I think bisexuality or any kind of queerness can be a gateway to viewing things on a spectrum and looking at the world differently, a gateway to better communication because it forces it, a gateway to overcoming shame that then you can apply to other areas of your life. And so everything you've been talking about is a clear example of that. And I'm glad that you found so much joy in this experience. So thank you so much, Keith and Candice, for coming on the podcast. It's amazing to see you again and hear the updates. And I'm so excited for everyone to read your story in the book, and for you to read the others too, but mostly for everyone to read yours. Thank you again so much for being here. This has been great, Keith and Candice.
Thank you so much.
We're so happy to be here.
Two Bi Guys is produced and edited by me, Robert Brooks Cohen, and it was created by me and Alex Boyd. Our logo art is by Caitlin Weinman. Our music is by Ross Mincer. We are supported by the Gotham, and we are part of the Zencastr Creator Network. Visit patreon.com/Robert Brooks Cohen for bonus content, early access, and exclusive video episodes. Thanks for listening to Two Bi Guys.